Do you ever wonder what's on your therapist's mind or what's going on inside her brain in between your sessions or after your sessions? Well, today you're in luck. We're sitting down with my wife, your therapist, to peel back the curtain a little bit and get an idea of what's going on in her brain. My name is Price, and I married your therapist.
Hi, it's your therapist, Ash. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about therapy and mental health, it's not the same thing as therapy or a replacement for it.
So we have a very exciting episode today.
We're so excited.
Yeah, because we have our first guest ever.
Woo!
Today we're joined by Emily Scott-Cruz, friend of the podcast.
And friend of Bill.
What a fun thing to say, you know, friend of the podcast. Actually, one of Ashlyn's friends from high school.
Yeah.
Who now lives in Charlotte and is joining us today to talk about alcohol.
Woo!
Both Emily Scott-Cruz and I would identify ourselves as alcoholics. Hi.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm an alcoholic.
So, before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about how you guys met, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, Emily, kind of what you do, and, you know, what you want the world to know.
Cool. Well, Ash and I met in high school. Was it like 9th or 10th grade?
It was 11th.
Oh my God. Okay, I have a terrible memory, as you'll find out. And we graduated together.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. We weren't super close in high school,
Yep.
but it was a very small school, like 21 kids in our graduating class. So
So everybody
we
was
knew
like
each other.
close enough.
Yeah. We didn't have a choice but to know each other.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure you're one of like the 2 people that I kept in touch with.
Exactly.
Afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
here we are. And we've ended up living in the same place, weirdly enough, after like moves on both of our parts. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And still is the only high school friend that I consistently see.
Yep. Yep.
Which is kind of
absolutely.
nifty.
Is that
so
that
that's
like a
nice.
high compliment, or are you really dissing your other high school?
No, definitely not dissing them. They're spread out, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody went
And I
everywhere.
don't have that much attention span, so maybe it is, I think it is just a high compliment.
Yeah, okay.
I'll
It's
take
just
it as
someone
one.
I like to keep in my life.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, what do you do, Emily? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, right now I'm defining myself by work because
Yes!
it's like right after 5.
Capitalism. Capitalism.
I am a consultant. I plan transportation, which is super cool. I mainly work with transit, but I do bike and pedestrian infrastructure planning as well. And outside of that, I play competitive table tennis, and I go to a bunch of AA meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really my life in a nutshell.
So when we have a bike lane that we don't like, that, you know, is kind of like fucking up our day, like there's a bicyclist who's like in our way, we can blame you.
You cannot blame me for the bicyclist in your way. That would be some form of codependency, I'm sure.
We'll have to get into that a different time, I think.
So let's dive right into it. Talk to me about your relationship with alcohol. I want to know the full story. When did you start drinking? When did it become a problem? When did you start taking action on that problem? Because for a lot of us, those are 2 very different times of our life. And kind of catch us up to where you're at today in terms of your sobriety.
Okay. Well, my relationship with alcohol is wholly unsuccessful, is where I would start with that. The first time I drank was around 15 or 16 years old, and we had this...
Was it with Ashlyn?
It was not with Ashlyn, no. The first time I drank was alone upstairs in we called it a playroom because it had toys from childhood, but really I just worked in there. And I had found somebody who was 21 to buy me cranberry Burnett's vodka, and I picked up a gallon of orange juice on the way home from school, and I killed half of the 5th. And somehow nobody noticed, even though I definitely remember going downstairs and like getting dinner and then bringing it upstairs very wobbly. But I also remember like I felt like I could breathe for the first time.
Yeah.
Because at that time I consider it to be a solution because I never really felt like I fit in.
So what drove you to that? Because that's kind of like a big step for a 15 or 16-year-old to find a 21-year-old, which when you're 15 and 21-year-old is like on the other side of ancient. You know, like how do you even find somebody like that? How do you sneak it past your parents, who I'm sure would not have been cool discovering that, you know? So
Okay, well, there were other kids in high school who were already drinking.
Right.
For the record.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so this person happened to also be in our school, but had been held back quite a bit. And so I just used the resources that I had to get what I needed.
Yeah.
You're a big fish in a small pond when you're held back like that.
Yeah, and I lived in a very strict household, so while other people got to like go out on the weekends with their friends, even if it was just like house parties, I didn't get to do that. So I had to find the experience they were having on my own.
Now, I've met a lot of people, a lot of alcoholics, especially at AA, who describe their first experience with alcohol as being the best ever, and that they're always trying to get to that experience again, that they're trying to relive that high school, got drunk for the first time, it was magical, and that's part of like their recovery, is like understanding that it's never going to be that. Like that's just a figment of their memory. You know, that wasn't reality. What was that first time? Does that exist in your mind like that?
Not exactly. I think I can kind of relate that to my relationship with hallucinogens more so.
Okay.
Because that is my other drug of choice. But no, with alcohol, it was really just like, I knew there was something off within me and I found something to fix that. It was always a means to an end, like from the beginning. And I found journals from when I was back in high school where I have written that I know I'm an alcoholic and I know my parents won't approve.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do, which was like totally unnerving when I was 23, 24 years old.
Right.
Getting sober for the first time to read, oh my God, 15-year-old
This isn't
Emily
happening.
knew that they were going
Yeah.
to turn into, that they were an alcoholic then, which is wild.
This is honestly a weirdly like common experience though. When Price and I were friends as teenagers, like he was telling me from some of those earliest days that he was an alcoholic and it wasn't showing up in his life in any other way, but that was like something that you knew about yourself.
Oh yeah. Big no.
Yeah, and I mean, alcoholics tend to drink because they like the effect produced by alcohol, and that effect continues, like it can be replicated time and time again, and it only stops working when it really stops working, you know?
So what did drinking look like for you in high school or throughout high school? Was it kind of alone in your playroom, which I find really funny, by the way? Was it in your playroom sipping on hard liquor amongst your childhood toys? Or was it going out and finding experiences outside of the house?
I did not get out much in high school. I really just did school very well, and I was in orchestra, and those were the two things in my life back then. So no, in high school, outside of that, I got it where I could. So when I was babysitting, I would bring some sort of water bottle with me every time, and I would just take like maybe an ounce from each bottle in whatever liquor cabinet they had at the house, and that was disgusting, but effective.
Got the job done.
Yeah, got the job done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also mixed in dry goods when I was 17, and I got caught almost immediately after starting to smoke. So, and then I got drug tested for the rest of senior year.
Oh,
and I was
that's
told
so
if I failed a drug test, I would not go to college, and I needed to go to college so I could keep drinking. So I didn't smoke, and I really limited my drinking. I did get caught once. On a family vacation, I got caught drinking a single beer, which like I was like, I'm sorry, I got so frustrated back then because I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
like,
that feels like such
this
a
isn't
normal
gonna touch
experience,
me,
right?
But I got caught, and when we came back from that family vacation, my dad brought me to an AA meeting, and that was the last day that he drank, too.
Okay.
Which I have mad respect for now, looking back, because addiction runs in my family. But I don't think I would have found what is now my solution to my alcoholism in AA without that first experience.
What was your first experience like there?
I just remember being, I was red the whole time. I was so embarrassed to be there.
Yeah.
And I recognized someone from my church, which was just like even weirder. She ended up becoming one of my close friends in the rooms, which is super cool. And I felt like the bad kid that couldn't hide what she does, what she likes.
Well, not to mention if it started off as feeling like an outsider, like feeling like you didn't fit in, and it's something that's trying to like remedy that, to then be right back in that same situation.
Yeah, as a 17-year-old in a room full of old people, because a lot of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous are very old. It's different in Charlotte, which is super cool, but like in Asheville, there were no young people back then.
Yeah.
The AA meeting that I went to out here, we live in a town outside of the city. It's a more rural. I think I brought the average age down by about 30 years just walking into the building.
That sounds right. Yeah.
A lot of folks were in there, and they called themselves the low bottom group. And
that's a good one.
Yeah, and these were.
I hate that.
The low bottom group was filled with people who had really hit rock bottom, and there were people in there with permanent brain damage from their alcoholism. There were people in there who had ruined their lives through drunk driving. It was a very sobering place to be. Yeah. But it was definitely like there's nobody here even my age. There's nobody here, and you saw people coming out like your age, but nobody was showing up consistently. And I think it's important, which is when you're first getting into it. Once you're a little more seasoned with AA, it's like what's going on. But when you're first figuring it out, I'm looking around the room for people who can relate to me. The truth is that if you're an alcoholic, you can relate to an alcoholic, but I didn't have that knowledge at the time.
Yeah, I have such respect for people that I know who got sober in rooms where they were like 30 years younger than everyone else, and they stayed sober.
Yeah.
Because it is easy in the very beginning to focus on differences rather than similarities.
Yeah.
And you're really looking for that. I think especially early on, you're looking for all of the reasons you don't belong. Like, this does not apply to me, this description, this definition, and like, look at this room. I don't fit in here. This doesn't apply.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to jump ahead, but so I've not just been sober this one time. This time around, my sobriety date is August 22nd, 2019. But the first time I came into these rooms was in 2017. And back then, after I went to my first AA meeting in Charlotte, where I was going to grad school at the time, there were like 4 people in a room, all of them significantly older than me. Mm-hmm. I got a big book. I cried my eyes out throughout the whole meeting. And then afterwards, I was like, you know what? If I can take this book to Whiskey Warehouse and not drink, then I'm not an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours later, I was drinking, and I was like, well, if I don't get drunk, then I'm not an alcoholic. And I don't remember much of that night other than I ended up uptown in some random CEO from Wells Fargo hotel room, and there were sake bombs and a lot of sushi involved. Mm-hmm. And I had driven there, and I woke up at 4 a.m. like, oh, I guess I've done my market research. It's time to go back to an AA room. I learn fast sometimes.
Yeah. No, you did the research, like you said, and drew your conclusions.
Because at that point, I hadn't hit what I would consider to be like my real bottom as far as external circumstances that were related directly to my drinking. Mm-hmm. In 2019, I flipped and totaled my Prius and got a DUI, and that was the external circumstance that I needed to be like, all right, consequences heard, action needs to be taken.
Wow. Okay, so let's take it back. You said that your first AA meeting was after you got caught drinking a beer.
Yeah.
Was that all the information they had? They just thought you were drinking a beer, so they caught, or did your parents know kind of the extent of your drinking?
I don't think that they knew the extent of my drinking, but my dad is a psychiatrist, and I'm sure he knew that I was an alcoholic from well before I even started drinking. Mm-hmm. Just because of the way that I would treat my sister, and there are some tendencies in alcoholics that are pretty much stable across the board as far as selfishness, self-seeking, and self-centeredness, and I exhibited all of those from a very early age.
Me too. Fuck. I feel so called out right now. I can't help but glance at their shirt, mediocre white men. It should be the diversity hire. I feel so called out by that.
It's been a tough day, huh?
Dear listener, I am a mediocre white man. I am being called out aggressively in the shirt. Okay, so your dad quits drinking at that stage. So he.
I didn't know this. until years and years later, until I got sober for the first time.
Oh, wow. So he didn't,
because
like,
we
hold
didn't
it over
really,
your head.
no, I mean, I never watched my parents drink alcoholically. Like, my mom liked wine, but she would have maybe a glass once a week with dinner, you know? And my dad has described it to me that he used to drink, like when he was in college and med school, he would drink a lot. But even then, this man would eat a pizza and drink what's that called? A pitcher of beer?
Uh-huh.
Before and or after, depending on how self-hating he was, his like 10+ mile runs.
Wow.
And in my brain, I'm like, I was lazy when I was in active addiction. Are you sure?
Doing something different.
You sure? But I'm not one to question anyone else's decision not to drink, because that's not my business.
Yeah. So what was your takeaway from AA? Were you going consistently, or did you just go to that one meeting?
In high school, it was just the one meeting.
Okay. What was your experience like? What was your takeaway?
I'm pretty sure it was then that I wrote in my journal that I was an alcoholic. So I think I heard what I needed to hear.
About that resonated with you.
But other than that, my takeaway was you gotta be smarter if you don't want to get caught. Right. You know?
There's that.
So you keep drinking, and then did you go to college at that point?
Yes, I did. I graduated and moved to Winston-Salem for college. And when I moved to Winston-Salem, the person I was dating at the time moved with me. It was a super toxic relationship. And that's when my drinking moved from like doing it for like the relief of feeling comfortable in my own skin to like escaping the pain that I was feeling around me. So that was a pretty dark first couple years of college. And after that relationship ended, I was drinking, I thought for fun. It was really just to escape the way that I felt. But I had found other things that helped me escape even more. So alcohol was great, but like it wasn't going to take me out of my mind for 10+ hours. Like acid would, you know?
Right. So you're dropping acid. Were you smoking pot at this point?
Oh God, yeah. I started smoking pot heavily after I broke up with that abusive one, because he was on probation. I was a dumb 18-year-old dating an ex-felon. Not the best move. Like, no wonder my parents hated him. And so I couldn't do any drugs around him because he had a probation officer and like.
Shit.
Didn't want him to go back to prison.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could have gotten out of that relationship so easy. Just one brownie would have done the trick, you know?
Right.
Yeah. In retrospect.
So, something that's so interesting to me about alcoholism is that a lot of alcoholics are just addiction specialists, basically. Like, we specialize in being addicted to different things, to different coping mechanisms, which includes alcohol and a whole lot of other things. But we call ourselves alcoholics. Mm-hmm. So what's your viewpoint on your relationship with like other addictions that you've had, or other coping mechanisms that were harmful, like different drugs?
I think that anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And there is nothing that can change my mind on that. Even today, I just do things I try to pay attention to how much I'm doing things. So maybe I still have clearly like unmanageable things in my life, but I think my first addiction was reading, and that's because when I was a kid, I would literally be able to leave whatever my reality was at the time through the pages of a book.
Yeah, it was an
and
escape
I was
still.
an obsessive reader when I was, especially in elementary school. Today, that transfers to the fact that I'm a workaholic, and right now I'm in a gym phase, which is a little new for me. Mm-hmm. But for the last like 3 years leading up to December of 2022, I full-fledged table tennis addict. Like there was maybe one day a week where I wouldn't play, and when I played, it was 2+ hours every day.
One thing I really love about that is just embracing the things that you love and going deep with them, you know? Sometimes those things you love really cause you harm, though. So you've got to figure out, or at least that's what's playing in my mind, because I really love drinking. I was super into drinking and everything that came with drinking, like going out with friends, going to bars. Like there's so much of our society is like built around drinking. Table tennis, not as much.
You just got to know where to look.
Yeah.
Has that been something, too, that you've had to find a balance with?
Yes. Yeah, although work makes it a little easier to find a balance because I have to do something for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Capitalism. I swear I'm a better table tennis player when I'm in my fun employment time between jobs. Like the sweet period where there's 2 weeks of a break before I start another job after leaving the last one. Man, I soar on the table. It's amazing.
Is it just the weight that's lifted off your heart?
It's probably generalized anxiety too, where I just can't leave my shit alone, and so I bring it wherever I go. It's cool. Meditation helps.
Okay, so you enjoy meditation?
I meditate. It's really hard for me to quiet my mind. So it's like I only meditate because I know it keeps me in contact with like the spirit of the universe, or I use the word God, which is a little controversial, but spirit of the universe, same thing. I don't define it by Christian standards. And if I don't have that ability to connect with my higher power, then my addict brain really kicks in and I start acting out and on things that like I wouldn't normally do. I can feel not meditating if I skip it for like 3 days.
How are you able to prioritize that? Like, how do you fit that into your life when it's something that's like tough to do?
Well, by this point, it's been more than 3.5 years of recovery. And I think it's just a habit now. Like if I haven't managed to do it at some point during my workday, which is my favorite time to meditate because I need to take a freaking break sometimes.
Nothing like getting paid to meditate. So.
Oh, for sure. And trust me, they want me to meditate. They don't know they need me to, but they do. I'm not a happy human.
Beneficial.
Yes. But I mean, a lot of like the way that I have to live today in order to not drink again is just discipline. Like I can go to like 4 meetings a week. I have to work with other people. I have to call my sponsor. I know we're maybe jumping into the AA deep end right now, but like it's all of the time that I used to spend drinking and using is free to me now. So I get to spend that doing things that fill the same void that I was always trying to fill with alcohol. And it's just different shit now.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the question that I had for you, is that thing still exists, that like if you're not able to cope with it using alcohol, like how do you cope with that, the fact that that still exists for you?
I mean, intense spiritual work is probably the end answer, and a living program. So like at my core, I am irritable and discontented, and if I do not stay in constant contact with a higher power, I don't work with others, I don't take accountability for my actions, then that irritability and the discontentedness will just come right back up, and it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but at some point I will drink again. And I have to believe that, because if I don't believe that, then I will drink again.
Oh no, and
which
absolutely.
Is cool.
But I think that's where a lot of people get caught up in whatever the thing is when you do have that bit of relief because you're doing the work, that you start to believe that like, oh, this is just now who I am. Like, no, it's working because you're doing the work. Yeah. And like you have to keep doing that. That's absolutely true.
And that was what happened before my last relapse.
Okay.
Is that I thought I was doing all right and that I could do the thing that I did find I loved during my first go around in recovery. I found I loved dancing. Yeah. And so when I moved back to Asheville, living with my parents, not the best plan, just for general stress reasons. My instinct, because I'd been like working a program in Charlotte, was not to go back into the rooms of AA in Asheville. I think somewhere underneath, like I knew that I had an opportunity, and I co-signed my own bullshit, so to speak. So the day that I started my last job, I went to a place called MG Road, RIP. It closed, but it used to be the best place to go dancing in Asheville on any given night. Nice. And I started drinking my pineapple juice and soda water, which is my go-to mocktail. And within 20 minutes, I was drinking tequila pineapples again. And for 3 weeks, I spent just getting drunk and once a week tripping. Yeah. Because I could still do that. And then I hit a bottom that I could not deny. and realized that I had to desperately work at this in order to not kill myself slowly.
Something that somebody at the Low Bottom group told me, which was really cool, because there's this piece of AA that's all about how long you've been sober. Like, I've been sober, or at least I felt that way going into it, right? That I've been sober for, oh, wow, you've been sober for 30 years. You know, that's incredible. I mean, there were people in there who are in there every day who've been sober for decades. They haven't had a sip of alcohol in decades. And they said it doesn't matter how long you've been sober. It's, have you been sober today?
Yep.
Because it is a daily fucking thing.
Yep.
That there is no, oh, well, it's easier for me to be sober because I've been sober for a long period of time, as opposed to, you know, I'm fresh at this, I'm new at this. The only difference is that you might have better habits built over time with intention that enable you to not drift back into your normal state.
Yeah.
And your normal state as an alcoholic is to drink and consume alcohol. So that's what you're doing. You're fighting that fucking demon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of spiritual tools at my disposal. So when I do notice that a part of my program is slipping, and this happened to me in like June, July of last year, I started dating someone. Still am dating that person. Wonderful human. But like there's this new person in my life, and I noticed pretty soon that it was affecting the way that I, like how many times I was going to meetings and stuff like that. And I have since become so much more intentional about like making sure that I go to the number of meetings that I know I need to, or if I feel squirrely in any way, and I don't crave alcohol anymore, which is a blessing of working in a good program. But like, even if like my emotional sobriety is a little off, and I feel like I could snap on somebody that I love, or I am thrown off by last minute assignments at work, then I know my solution. I can call another alcoholic, get outside of myself. I can go to a meeting. I can call my sponsor, and I can meditate and I can pray. Like there are so many things I can do that are standing between me and a drink now.
Yeah.
Whereas when I relapsed the last time, I did not have a proper mental defense against that first drink. So I didn't have an ability to stop myself because I didn't have a higher power, first of all. I think that's a big reason for me why I drank again the last time, even though I knew I was an alcoholic. Like I'd been around the rooms for a couple years. And this time, like I've gotten one of the monikers for God is the gift of desperation. So like people in the rooms say that their higher power is the gift of desperation. They've gotten to the point where they are desperate enough and willing enough to be honest and open-minded and like actually give themselves to a different way of life in order to see the results. And I have seen the results, which is fucking cool.
Yeah.
What sort of role have sponsors played in your life? And what is for anybody who might not know, what is a sponsor exactly, you know?
So a sponsor, and let me back it up. So the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, like its derivative is these two guys, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. And one of them, and I'm sorry, I'm not an AA history buff yet. One of them was a hopeless alcoholic, according to so many doctors, and he managed to get sober by finding a spiritual like experience. Mm-hmm. And then he kept realizing that if he didn't give that away, that feeling that he had, then he would go back to drinking. So he met the other guy. I think Dr. Bob was number 2. And so they shared the message. So essentially, like the premise is that you only get to keep what you have by giving it away. So sponsors are people that you work with. I've always been told that if you're new to AA and you're looking for a sponsor, which is highly recommended from day one, you find somebody who has what you want and you ask them to work with you. And so this time around, I did it better. In the past, I picked the youngest person with tattoos. That was one of my calling cards. Mm-hmm. Or just anybody young because I knew I could manipulate them and I genuinely wasn't actually ready to commit to this. Yeah. I was California sober for a while between 2018 and 2019, which is I don't drink, but I can do anything else. Fun fact, still miserable if you're a real alcoholic and addict like me. So this time around, I actually took suggestions, which I've been told are free, but you pay for the ones you don't take.
That's a good way to look at it.
And I found a woman who was hilarious. She was like very sharp and to the point. Mm-hmm. She was also gay and had a BMW and a wife and a mountain house. And I was like, I want what she had.
I want to be you when I grow up.
And so I asked her to sponsor me, and she was like, she didn't say yes. She said, call me tomorrow at 7 a.m. So I called her the next day at 7 a.m., and I have been calling her. It's changed because she is training for a marathon. So now I call her at 8:45. But, like, I have called her every weekday since, like, September or October of 2019.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's commitment.
I have to start my day in these rooms in some way, shape, or form. Like, in addition to my little meditation that I read in the morning and my daily yeah, there's a lot of discipline that comes into long-term recovery.
It's a lot of discipline, yeah.
And I genuinely believe that if I don't, and it's not even a fear, right? Like, I used to do all these things because I was afraid of drinking again. I'm not afraid of drinking anymore. I know that it will happen if I stop doing the things that I do that have been successful, because, like, I'm not gonna, don't fix what ain't broke, you know?
Yeah.
But now I do it because I want to live. It's not that I'm afraid of drinking. It's that I want to keep living the life that I have, that I've been given so freely because of the shit that I've learned, and that's cool.
Is there a moment that changed that fear for you, or was that a process to get to?
I think it happened over time. I felt a lot of growth in my first year of recovery, and by that I mean between 2019 and 2020. Mm-hmm. But it's also kind of like when I'm sure this is what parents experience when they're looking at their newborns, and they're like, whoa, you're growing so fast. The rest of the world is like, it's the same size.
Right, it takes forever.
But, like, I was experiencing such rapid growth and, like, introspection and awareness and a spirituality that I hadn't ever experienced before because I'd never been ready to. And then in my second year, I kind of felt like I plateaued. It felt kind of gross and cringy. Like, I'm supposed to be growing at this rapid rate all the time. What's happening here?
Yeah, it's completely unsustainable.
And now I'm back to a place where, like, I am so content with nonlinear growth and just generally good maintenance. Means so much more to me than rapidly growing. Because frankly, I've worked through I'm very proud of the progress that I've made, both in therapy, which highly recommend continuing therapy if you're an alcoholic, because alcoholism is not just like a one thing fixes all of it. Like, it's not just the rooms of AA and therapy even. Like, I need table tennis. I need to stay active in some way. I need friends. I need so many other things in my life in order to stay sober.
It's, again, kind of like having all of those different buffers, all of those different things that are helping keep that up, so that it's not just one step to being back in active addiction, but that there are so many things that keep that going. Mm-hmm. What was really different for you between the first time you were experiencing sobriety and then now after you've had the relapse?
The first time around, I hadn't done any work on codependency. I think that's a big thing.
That's a big one.
And, like, 4 months in 2017. It was the end of 2017, so early 2018. I had started dating this guy who liked to do drugs, and found out he likes to do hallucinogens. So it did not take much for me to, like, go back to tripping.
Yeah.
Which is my drug of choice, I have found. But, like, this time I started doing intense work on codependency in early 2019 when I was in yet another codependent relationship, as I do. And reading the book Codependent No More is something I have my sponsees do now, because I just so firmly believe in that book's ability to change thinking and action.
It's a good one.
It is so good. And today I read that before I get into a new relationship and when a relationship ends. Like,
I like
and
that.
Sometimes in between, if I feel like I'm rereading it now because I felt some weird codependent traits come up with my sponsees and with a couple of friends who are making decisions that they're just, which is not my business to care about whether the advice they ask for is taken or not.
But it'll definitely trigger that codependency again.
Yeah, but I'm just getting
but I'm helping.
Yeah, I'm getting so frustrated, and my serenity is getting so like skewed because these people who have asked for my advice aren't taking it, which is not my business. The outcome is never my fucking business. So I'm rereading Codependent No More again. That's what's different. That was a circular little train there.
That is different.
In what ways do you think codependency and your alcoholism were intertwined?
I think it was the first codependent relationship I ever experienced. And it was something I could always rely on because it's very predictable. Even if my actions with it aren't predictable.
Inaccessible.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just I put all of my ability to feel in the bottle, all of my security was there. Like, there's just so many things that I relied on drinking and using to give me the relief that, like, is really not in a bottle.
For me, it was like understanding that I felt so out of control of my own emotions so often that I would feel so angry or anxious or spiteful or whatever it was, and then getting to be able to drink, like, on a day, so, like, narrowing in on, like, a day of my life, like, I'm going to rush home from an anxious day at work so that I can start drinking as soon as I walk through the door, because that gives me some semblance of control of my life. Like, I actually get to decide how my day goes because I'm going to get drunk now. It doesn't matter how shitty my day was. Now I'm getting drunk. Yep. And that's not control.
No.
The alcohol is controlling you. You are not in control at all.
Yeah.
So I've thought for myself, and I assume this is true for other people, but I don't know. I can't speak for other people. I had an emotional issue that drove me to alcohol. But very quickly, the root problem was no longer super relevant. It still existed, but I had grown a new problem, which was actual dependency on alcohol. Is that the evolution for most alcoholics, or is it
that
a different
comes
path?
out of something else and then becomes the major issue?
Yeah.
For me, I view my like active addiction as a symptom of a root cause, which is like alcoholic thinking. So removing drink away from an alcoholic isn't going to, like, that didn't keep me from still being an alcoholic, right? Like, I am an alcoholic regardless of whether I'm drinking or not, which is like why I have to do so much work, because the problem for me is rooted in my thinking. And then when I take the drink away, I'm just left void unless I do action. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's filling up a spot in your soul.
Yeah, and like, I know at different points in my life, the reasons why I was drinking or drinking as heavily as I was were related to different ongoing, like, external factors. But at the end of the day, like, I could have had absolutely nothing wrong in my life, and I know I would have still drank like that.
And I think very few people with nothing wrong in their life can drink like that for any amount of time and not have something go wrong in their life, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, they can, and those are heavy drinkers, and those are fascinating people, and I know a handful of, like, I was married to one of them. Like, my ex-husband, also best friend, just for the record, is a heavy drinker, and he is genuinely not an alcoholic. And he would say that. I can see that because he doesn't drink the way I drank, even if he might drink the same quantity that I used to drink occasionally, you know?
There is something different that happens that I don't have that in me. And Price and I could drink around the same. It was always a mistake if I drank anything like Price drank, because we are very different size human beings. But sometimes I would make that mistake. But that we could be drinking with the same sort of consistency all throughout our relationship. And it wasn't on my mind outside of drinking. It wasn't taking up any other space in my life. And it wasn't something that fixed or related to any issue in my life. It did create issues. I feel like I didn't like who I was when I was really drinking. But it wasn't that was about as much space as it took up. It's like, oh, I don't like the feeling of being drunk. Oh, I don't like who I am when I'm intoxicated. But it was never anything more than that. And in fact, I quit drinking shortly before Price quit drinking because I realized that it was something that I needed to deal with in myself, and that it wasn't something that I could have in my life if I, that was a way that I was like supporting that. And Price was continuing to drink with him because it was fun to drink with him for the first couple of drinks, and then it wasn't fun anymore.
Then it became very quickly not fun
very much
for
not
anybody.
fun anymore.
Yeah, I had no idea how to drink any amount of alcohol that didn't end with me getting drunk. I couldn't do it. I couldn't have a beer. That wasn't possible. I remember we went with one of my closest friends, we went to a distillery, and we got handles of the gin that they made there. Man, that gin was really good. I don't Fuck. So we go our separate ways. I drink my handle of gin almost immediately. You know, like within a few days, it's gone. I visited him like over a year later, and it was still sitting on his counter.
Baffling, right?
Untouched. It took my brain a moment to like recompute. How do you have alcohol?
You don't drink right, sir. Let me tell you, if that hasn't been done, and you've gotten like 4 more, minimum.
Yeah,
because it's a year. Like,
yeah, I'm expecting like boxes.
Clearly you don't understand how to actually drink.
And he's like, yeah, I love that stuff. When I mix myself a drink, I usually use that. I'm like, how do you still have this? Like, this is the original one. Yeah. Because my relationship with alcohol was disordered.
And you noticed after you quit drinking that the people in your life who would drink with you, like, no longer drank. It's not something that's on our minds. It wasn't a part of our life in the same way.
Yeah, my friends did a lot of drinking because I wanted to drink. So I would get drinks for everybody. I would be the one to say, let's go to the bar.
Every social activity was around drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really easy. It's really easy for every social activity to
just
involve
missed
alcohol.
each other. We could have had so much shitty fun.
Oh my God, that would have been a dynamic.
Yeah, I think that we would have pushed each other over the edge for sure.
We didn't need each other like that.
2 very outgoing, high energy alcoholics, just like getting shit faced with no recourse for, yeah.
Thankfully missed that one.
The joy of sobriety for me has been that it's given me enough fucking wiggle room to be able to work on myself. That I was going to therapy, I was seeing a therapist while I was drinking, and I felt like I was making some progress on the things that we were working on, some of my emotional issues. But it took quitting drinking for really any of that to go home, or to hit home. Yeah. You know, I was so locked in on so many of these toxic behaviors and these things that were causing me so much harm that I couldn't let go of them until I quit drinking. Like, I couldn't even deal with that until I dealt with the issue at hand.
I feel like drinking really kept you from looking at yourself in a lot of ways. That it wasn't until then that anything related back to you, that every other issue was always external until you had dealt with that one. Because, of course, you can't really take a good look at yourself when that's happening. I
had one therapist before I got sober this time around, and it was for like the 3 weeks that I was in Asheville drinking. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, it was 4 weeks because I saw her before I started my job, and I managed to convince this poor sweet woman that I wasn't an alcoholic, and she co-signed my bullshit.
No.
She didn't know me. I wasn't being honest with her.
Right.
So like, if a therapist says maybe I'm not an alcoholic after all, and I could go try it again, then I'm gonna fucking go try it again.
Right.
And now that when I got sober though, one of the things that my dad really recommended, and I am really good, like close with my dad, and I trust his advice when it comes to brain things, because psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. Also now he's an addiction medical director at an addiction treatment center.
Oh, wow.
And that's all because of me. He loves his cushy state job, and he's very good at it. I wouldn't have done it without his addict daughter, though.
That's right. Yeah.
But, like, he gave me the name of a therapist who I came to find out was, like, 25 years sober when I started seeing her 3 years ago. and she like specializes in trauma and substance abuse disorder, and I have never been honest with a therapist until meeting her, and I'm so grateful for that, because as a result, I wasn't ever willing to go to therapy before getting sober, like, and I would go, but it would just be to say that I was going.
Just going through the motions.
Yeah, exactly. And now I have proudly done EMDR a couple times, which is major. And I'm learning that I tell myself weird lies about my poor memory that really aren't related to my memory at all. It's just related to like early childhood, not feeling safe, feeling emotions. So I just don't remember big feelings of anything.
Yeah.
That's a new discovery that I meant to tell you about before we started this podcast, but I got distracted by all my work gossip. Anyway, I'm learning things about myself too, and like facing myself in a way I haven't been able to before.
I think alcohol is a lot like when I've gone through weight gain, is like changing clothes but not in front of the mirror, and I'm not really looking at photos of myself because I really just can't look at myself. I don't like what I'm seeing, and I don't even realize that I'm like pushing that away. And alcohol is enabling you to not have to look at your life either, because immediately you can start just getting drunk and feeling good, and you don't actually have to like evaluate your shitty life choices that are slowly ruining all of your relationships and ruining your ability to be like a functional member of society, and like ruining your opportunities like career wise and all of that stuff. Yeah.
So what role has therapy played in your sobriety, and how is it different or similar to AA?
Well, I talked to my therapist about everything. I also talked to my sponsor about everything, but like maybe not on the same level, just because like I don't necessarily tell my sponsor all of the ways that my brain gets a little crazy when I'm in new relationships and stuff like that. And maybe I should, but I know my therapist is trained in that, so I don't. I think that in AA, I really try to not focus on myself when I'm in that context. Like, unless I've been asked to share my story, my job in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at this point of my recovery is to be of service, of maximum service to those around me. So therapy is where like there's somebody who is of service to me. Yeah. And AA is where I get to be of service to other people, because if I'm not, then there's a piece of my recovery missing, and I'm stepping closer rather than further away from a drink.
That's really important. It's important to have both of those things, to have space and time that is like centered on you and is focused on you figuring shit out, but then also time that's focused on like other people, and especially people who've been in a place that you can relate to. And I think that that's a huge, that like the community aspect is so important as well. And that's true in any sort of recovery, you know, addiction recovery or trauma recovery or whatever, is that like we're in those spaces where we're seeing ourselves reflected back to us, and then in spaces where we really are sitting across the table from somebody who like sees us, and we're getting to focus on us. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it was like right around the time that so when I moved to Charlotte in, oh Lord, let me do math, 2021, late 2021, I was still a big fan of Zoom meetings, and I had like my sponsee in Asheville, so I felt like my service work was still pretty good. So I would literally, and I was getting through a shitty breakup, so I would work from home, go play at club for like 3+ hours, sometimes 5 hours, obsessively again.
Table tennis?
Yeah. And then I would hop on a Zoom meeting, or I would do a Zoom meeting in the morning and get my like that kind of medicine that way. And it wasn't until I moved to a more central location in Charlotte that I started like going to in-person meetings and actually building a network in recovery in like the Charlotte area. And it was around that time too that I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna just ghost my therapist for 9 months because she wanted me to, which she said she didn't want me to do EMDR, but it did seem like the next step. But we did one session of EMDR, and I got scared because I remembered things from like the feelings that I felt when I was a kid that I did not feel comfortable with. I'm still not comfortable with feeling negative emotions in a therapeutic space, and I'm working on it. But like, I blamed switching jobs and having to pay more for insurance, which is a bold-faced lie in retrospect, for just like not talking to my therapist. And I was getting so much else from the service work piece and like working with new people in the rooms that I floated pretty damn well. And it wasn't until October or November when I was actively encouraging my sponsees to go to therapy where I was like, God damn it. I don't do this. I don't walk one way and talk a different way. Like, I've got to do the deal. So I texted her, and she couldn't fit me in until January too. So we did another EMDR session, and we started uncovering other stuff, and like, I feel so much more ready and slightly more willing to go into this woman's office and be asked questions that end up making me cry for an hour.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
You start to see that, like, that's not the end goal.
I know one day I'll feel better, damn it, but I would like it to be faster than it is.
Faster, less painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. You and I have a very similar outlook on therapy. Like, it's working. Damn it.
Yeah, I know. Like, this should not be feeling like this and also working.
Let's take a second to just break down, because I don't think we've talked about EMDR on this podcast yet. Ashlyn, just give us the high level. What is EMDR?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so EMDR, a really high level, is that it's a treatment and it often deals with trauma. And it's, which basically we all have. And it's engaging communication between both sides of your brain through bilateral stimulation. So in some way, both sides of either you have eye movement back and forth, or you have maybe tapping that's occurring on either side of your body, and that is engaging your brain and in a different way. And when your brain is talking back and forth, you're able to process things in a different way, and you might be processing things that are unconscious things, and really going back. And trauma is stored very differently than regular memories are, and it's one way to access that sort of storage, and it can be a really, really powerful tool for getting through that shit.
I know Ashlyn, you've worked in the restaurant industry. Have you ever worked in the restaurant industry?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. So it's like
I'm a 7+ year veteran, baby.
Woo! So it's like when you're in the kitchen of like a restaurant that's been in existence and operating for 20 years, and you move a big piece of equipment, and the grease and the grime, and it's like an inch thick, and you're like, nah, and you put the piece of equipment back. That's what EMDR feels like, except you start cleaning, right? You're like really getting under.
Man, I thought you were going to bring up like restaurant trauma there for a second. I was like, I mean, that's real too.
Restaurant trauma is real. No, I mean that it's like you're really dislodging like pieces of hurt or strong emotion that are wedged deep in there.
It is the stuff in the back for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That it's able to access stuff that maybe you don't have conscious access to, because of the way that it's able to access this separate bit of storage, essentially. So
we have a few minutes left. What sort of advice do you have for people who, how do you sit back and evaluate, am I an alcoholic? You know, how do I know if my relationship with alcohol is healthy or not? What sort of advice do you have to somebody who's asking that question?
I think most people who ask that question probably already know the answer.
It's like Googling, am I gay?
Yeah, no, that's so true.
The fact that you're asking.
Yeah, if you're asking, I mean, it's worth exploring a little bit more, whether it's your sexuality or your addiction. And I would recommend not exploring in the same way for either of those. Like,
different types of exploration.
Go sleep with other people of the same gender, please. But maybe don't like shoot up.
Yeah, that's not the way to explore.
Jesus
but
Christ.
Definitely, if you're researching and that thought is on your mind, that there's probably more to it.
Yeah, probably more to it. I would also just say for the record that I am in no way speaking for AA as a whole. Everything that I've shared today has been from my experience, and yeah, that's it. That's just important to note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really important when you're talking about anything that's so personal. You know, being an alcoholic looks very different from person to person and coming to terms with that.
Yeah, and AA is very much a unique experience. I mean, even between the two of you, you have very different relationships with AA in terms of your sobriety and.
Yeah. AA played a useful role for me as I was like getting sober and really understanding how serious it was.
Yeah.
Seeing somebody who's been sober for 40 years when you're still questioning, is this really a problem for me, changes your perspective on it a little bit, because you're like, this person has been coming to AA meetings every day and is committed to their sobriety like that. That means that this is real, that there's something to this, you know, or at least that was my takeaway. But I didn't find AA in the long run like super helpful personally. Maybe it was more the specific group that I was a part of, but nothing made me want to drink more than a bunch of folks talking about how much they wanted to drink.
Yeah, that ended up being like a trigger for you.
Yeah, and then a lot of the people, like I had a sponsor, and you know, that there was real shock that I didn't feel like I was getting a lot out of it. You know, there was like, because a lot of these folks really believe in that process and it has worked for them and they've seen it work for countless others. And, you know, I totally support it and I love it and I'm a huge fan of it. But, you know, for me, I was able to achieve sobriety and maintain my sobriety with, you know, through other means, I guess.
And I think at some point in the last 3 years, I would have heard that and be like, God damn, I'm so fucking jealous. Like, here's an alcoholic who doesn't need to do the fucking prayer and the meditation and the work with others and all this shit. But today, I'm like so grateful that I do have this like program for living, because I mean, I am deeply undisciplined and I would not be able to not drink if I didn't have a set of steps and a lot of structure. So mad props is what I'm trying to get out of my mouth. Mad props for being one of the cool alcoholics who doesn't need AA.
Alcoholism is not cool.
I think it's awesome.
Sobriety is cool.
Yeah, but you need the alcoholism to get to the sobriety. So therefore,
that's fair. Okay.
Relationship. But I think that's important that there are multiple routes through that, and then it can look different for different people.
But if we're talking about admiring those routes, I'm sitting here just in awe of the commitment that you've made to your own sobriety and the work that you're doing on a daily basis to achieve that. Like, it doesn't sound easy.
Well, my option is that or die, so.
Yeah, it sounds worth it.
Downplaying it a little, and I know I do work, but like, also, there is a part of it where I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because I've like thought I had a choice before, and I could have died many times. Yeah. And this book is full of death threats. Just a spoiler alert. There's so many times where like, if you drink, you will die, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a good freaking reminder.
I forgot.
It might not be tomorrow, but but it is suicide on a payment plan. That's what addiction is.
Wow.
You know?
Because it doesn't stop until it's killed you.
Yeah, exactly. You're just killing yourself slowly, because at least for me, when I was in active addiction, like that, I might not have consciously recognized it at the time, but like, I did not want to be alive, you know? Like, and my solution for that was to get as fucked up as I possibly could, which eventually will do the job, you know?
No, for me, it was escalating to the point that we were almost to the point of no return with my drinking, that it would have killed me. Or it would have seriously altered my life. I would have lost my job, or, you know, irreparable damage to my life, which would have only driven me deeper into that pit. Mm-hmm. The fact that I didn't go into 2020 quarantine drinking is a gift from God, because I think that that would have done me in, and I think that a lot of people really struggle during quarantine.
Wait, can I ask if you have spirituality in your life?
Yeah, I believe in a higher power. I guess we've been talking a lot about agnosticism lately, so but I would say so. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And I think that that's given me a lot of comfort in a way that I think a higher power gives people that, I don't know, even the gift of desperation. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful that you came all the way out here to sit down with us and talk to us about your sobriety journey. Any other thoughts that you have or anything you want to share?
I mean, I feel like we could keep talking for hours and hours and hours, so maybe don't open that door.
We can do a follow-up. We can have you on later.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, part two.
Okay, well, Emily Scott-Cruz, thank you so much for your time. Ashlyn, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, Bryce.
And we'll see you next time on I Married Your Therapist. All right, let's drink.
Holy shit.
I'm fucking kidding. You want some water?